All right, it's working.
Mike, I guess you're running this thing, right?
Yeah, well, I think we'll just have to call the meeting back to order and then have any discussion about the, any additional discussion.
So we know Robin's not coming.
Correct.
And I guess Dave isn't coming because he didn't come to the other meeting, but do we assume Bob is coming?
My understanding is that
Mike, I guess you're running this thing, right?
yeah, but Bob. Well, I think we'll just have to.
Well, I got a crazy echo from somewhere.
Order and then have okay, hold on. Any discussion about the.
Do you have two tabs open, Mike?
Got it. I think I got it now.
Okay.
Better.
Yeah.
Okay.
No
Sorry.
echo yet.
My understanding, we're still waiting on Bob. We know that Bob is going to be here, but we do have a quorum right now. I don't believe we've heard from David, but my understanding is that Bob will be on the meeting, so we may want to give Bob an additional minute or two to get logged on.
Well, I think that's a good idea. So I didn't get a different agenda. We're still working off the Monday's agenda.
Correct.
Because it's a recessed meeting.
And I'll maybe ask Heather if she has any additional thoughts about reopening the recess meeting.
Yeah, she was on. Is she still here?
Yeah.
Heather.
I'm here.
Hi,
Yeah. Hello. Hi, everyone. Yes, just open the recess meeting, call it back to order, and then you're working on the same agenda because it's the same meeting. So you can go back to the item.
We just pick up the same meeting.
Correct.
The same agenda item 4A.
Correct.
Okay. And we got Mark here, so that's 5. Well, I didn't see him before. I might need to change my view.
And Bob's logging on right now.
Okay, so we'll have everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, it's 5:03 on my computer. Let's call the recessed meeting of March 22nd back to order. And then we will return to new business 4, agenda item A, public hearing text amendment to the UDO Article 9, Section 9.3, Cashiers Commercial Area, Figure 9.1 and 9.2. So Heather, we've heard the public hearing, and now it would normally be time for us to discuss as a council what to do and then make a decision by some sort of a motion. Am I correct?
Yes, you are correct. The 24-hour period has passed now since the end of the public hearing. So it's now on like a regular agenda item for you to discuss, and then for any member to make a motion with regard to that, a second, and then you can have really the motion that should be made first. There's a second, and then discussion, any discussion that you want to have at that point.
Okay. So
I'd like, if that's the case, then I'd like to make a motion to defer this decision on changing the wording until we have better clarity.
Second.
All right, discussion. So here's the only thing with this. Like, I don't know what we're waiting on. Like, I understand that people are very concerned about this size issue. But we've seen both from a letter from the consultant that the county hired to move our ordinance from one place on the county website to another place on the county website. And someone at that company added something that we never voted on.
I know.
And we've been doing business, and John spoke in the last meeting saying we've never had this. We've never applied this. So my personal feeling, and I want to hear from everybody, is that we shouldn't legislate by mistake if it's really good that the public is interested in this, and that we can start a discussion about build a maximum size. But right now we would be living under, and Heather, I would love to hear your opinion on this. We'd be living under a thing where we have conflicting statements out there about what the rule is that we're under.
Is that really a problem? I mean, why can't we fix everything at once? If, you know, in other words, I see why, and I know this is not what you want to hear, Michael, but there are so many people upset about this right now, and they don't understand what's going on. Is it really that important that we make this, change this wording right now before we go ahead and take a look at some of the recommendations coming from Stewart or whoever else? In other words, well, that's what I have to say. And I don't know, anybody else speak up?
Well, I think, Debbie, what you're asking, maybe we can get some clarity, because I don't necessarily see the urgency of making the change at this moment, because quite frankly, precedent has set our guidelines on how we've handled things, which I think is right. But precedent really sets how we handle this. And, you know, whether we get an eraser and erase that out, or change it to something else. Right now, wouldn't we be governed by precedent, Heather, if somebody came to us and said, well, wait a second, you did it there, and you did it there, and you did it there, and you did it there?
Well, Bob, that's a good question. And what would happen, your planning director has already made the determination that, you know, because this is an error, it never existed. And this error, this graphic error, doesn't say anything. It says less than or equal to, we're talking about a maximum structure, and it says less than or equal to. You cannot have a less than or equal to maximum. A maximum is a maximum. It then says 5,000. It doesn't say 5,000 what. It just says 5,000. It has other errors in it as well. If you go underneath that, it talks about a conditional use permit, which we no longer have. We have a special use permit, which was the other change. So there are, and then the 5,000 doesn't exist. So there are 4 errors just in this upper half of the graphic. And your planning director has already made the determination that this doesn't apply or doesn't mean anything, that the text applies. And now what happens is anything coming in that's greater than or equal to 1,500 square feet is going to come to you as a special use permit. And there is nothing else. So you're correct in the way that by removing this or not removing this graphic doesn't change anything from that perspective. You're going to keep getting these from the planning department in the same way that you always have. What it does do is leave confusion out there for someone reading your ordinance and trying to figure out coming in. It also leaves open the possibility, the legal liability issue for someone coming in and applying, and someone challenging it, saying, well, wait a minute, what does this 5,000 thing mean? And challenging it. So it may mean you have more hearings, and it may mean we end up in court. And that, from a legal standpoint, is why I would recommend that you correct the error and then have these conversations moving forward. But you're absolutely correct. If you don't correct this error now, it doesn't change how we've been operating.
I understand that, Heather, but if somebody comes in and challenges our what's in the graphic and have you right now, they're only going to challenge it that I could potentially go over 5,000. They're not going to challenge it that, you know, if it's stripped out of there, or the 5,000 is left in there, they're going to challenge it and say, because of precedent, you know, that has no meaning. And I think until we have something very clarifying, which, quite frankly, if you look at the documents that were showed at our meeting, they're calling for higher square footage, and that's from people that, you know, to save cashiers and everything. Well, the document they produced says 8,000 to 12,000 square feet, which is more than the 5,000 square feet. So my point is, I think everybody is very much on edge at this time just because of the hype of the whole Macaulay episode and how this all came to light and everything else. I don't think it hampers us doing business going forward until we get this thing very accurately spelled out.
Heather, let me ask you a question. Do we personally have legal liability, and does the county have legal liability since this error has been found and we've been made aware of it? Are we compelled to act to fix it?
Well, again, not necessarily, because again, remember that it doesn't, this graphic doesn't say anything. It says 5,000 something. We can't apply it. It's not anything we can apply. And so you are covered as a council under the county's, liability policy. So if someone takes this to court, I can never stop someone, and you all know this, we've had these talks before, you can never prevent someone from suing anybody, can't do that, but you are covered under the county's policy in that regard. And so we would, take care of this. And yes, it doesn't say anything, so we keep applying it. So it's not but I don't know if I'm answering your questions. I don't think you would have personal liability. It would be an issue for the council and the county as far as having to defend that in court.
So we basically right now are like sitting in a situation where, to make ourselves more comfortable, we're going to knowingly leave worse law out there if we leave it the way it is.
But they can't use that law. That's what she was just saying, is it can't even be applied.
But which is why. Go ahead,
That
Heather.
wasn't exactly what I was saying. They can. Somebody can. Again, it caused confusion. So again, we're leaving something out there that is confusing to people, and that it gives them something else. It gives them something to challenge. If somebody comes in, we might have this issue if the Boys and Girls Club came back to you in a couple weeks and had a modification. That could be an issue. We'd move forward as we always had, but you could have somebody that said, wait a minute, they're modifying a building that's more than 5,000, we think, square feet. So we're going to, we're going to have an issue with that, or anything else. It just leaves it out there as a confusion, but we would continue to apply the ordinance I believe, I'm speaking for Mike there, but I believe that the planning staff would continue to apply the ordinance as they always have.
Again, I think Heather's correct. I think that's our understanding. That's why we, stated that as such in the last hearing, that there is no maximum ever identified, but it does cause confusion, and clarity does help. And certainly, for the reasons that Heather has stated, that's more reason why we brought that to you for this consideration, because not everything that we do and with the ordinances, and John can speak to this more, are all special use permits. So we do talk with folks about expansions of existing buildings and other things. So again, there, our determination would still be the same, but there's still going to be some ability for folks to challenge that determination every time we make it.
I sort of feel like we hired someone to paint our house, and someone from the painting company did graffiti on our house. And then we look at it and we go, well, do we have to hire keep the graffiti because someone from the painting company that we hired did the graffiti on our house? No, you get stuff right when you have the chance to get stuff right. And then it's good that we have this community engagement, and we can right now promise in front of all the people listening that we fix errors and we start a process, like a grown-up process, where we have community involvement and we have these things. If Cashiers needs to have a square footage maximum, then it needs to be discussed and people need to participate in it. This is not a public hearing for a square footage maximum. This is a public hearing to get rid of a mistake that says buildings shall be less than or equal to 5,000 somethings in a picture. We can do this. It's going to make my life easier if we defer it, but it's just going to mean we're just kicking the can down another day where later on we're going to have to clean our house.
I just don't see any imminent danger in leaving it as it is until, I mean, it's not going to stop any of the processes that we're going through right now. And you're right, somebody could challenge something, but we're already granting more than 5,000 square feet on a special use process right now. So what are they going to challenge? Is that it's less than, you got to be less than? There wouldn't be a challenge, because if somebody applied right now for a special use and it was 7,000 feet, we found it to be everything that it needs to be, we would put it in. And that would happen now with the wording. Or if we take it out, it would happen.
I think we need to get to work on making it right as quickly as possible and not kicking it down the road too long. I mean, how hard is this? I mean, it's not rocket science. I think we ought to be able to work on it the next, 30, 60 days and put in what is right.
But what good does it do to, sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt, but.
No, I don't think it's that difficult.
Well, we can certainly work on it. I mean, there'll have to be a public hearing and studies and everything else, but in the interim, I don't see, other than giving people warm fuzzies, what good it does to keep a mistake that we've been made aware of, that we have a letter from the company that made the mistake that says, this is a mistake. Please correct our mistake.
Yeah, and
giving people warm fuzzies is oftentimes what people want. So let's give them warm fuzzies, work on it in the next 60 days, and come up with a solution that everyone is happy with, that we can follow as a guide moving forward.
I agree with Mark. Go ahead, Mark.
Not have the backlash of they pushed it through, they did what we didn't want.
I agree with Mark on that, because after the scare that this community has just been through and everybody's collectively taking a deep breath, I don't think that would be good to stir them up again. I don't care. I don't think it's that big of a risk, and then it'll make us get on it right away.
I kind of chimed in here late from everybody else. Anyway, I apologize about that. I'm sorry I missed the Monday thing. But when, Michael, when we had that subcommittee with Kevin involved, we did discuss a maximum square footage on buildings out there.
That's correct.
And there was
I believe the number we threw out was 8,000.
It was 8,000 square feet.
What the small area plan calls for. And we ought to give them what the small area plan calls for. It's greater than what theoretically is in there now. I don't get that argument, but
which the Boys and Girls Club just recently that we allowed to build, I think that building is right at 8,000 square feet in size.
Well, I think the Brookings building is the same, and so I don't want anybody going, yeah, but that's an institutional building. It's okay to do that with the Boys and Girls Club, but we just did it with Brookings too, and that's a private individual, and so we have precedents that we've already set in this. And I just don't understand maybe the urgency I get it, Michael, but you know what? There's other things in that UDO that are going to come up as time goes on, when we're going to go, oh crap, we didn't see that one either. I don't see any harm in letting that thing ride for 30 days so that we get correct wording in it.
It's fine with me. I mean,
Michael, real quick, if I could jump in, and Michael Poston, if you could speak to the, and maybe even Heather, speak to the actual timing that a ordinance amendment would take, because it's a legislative and it'd have to go through planning board and the board of commissioners. So it's not a 30-day process. It's going to be longer. And then also with community meetings that you would have to have in Cashiers to get that number that you're looking for. I think it's important to speak to the actual timeline.
Yeah.
So if we put this on the agenda for, so leaving the mistake out there, if we look to try to investigate a building maximum, if we talk about it the next meeting, giving staff time to prepare language, giving staff time to prepare studies to educate us about building sizes and Cashiers, et cetera, and we were to approve it at the next meeting, what would that timeline look like?
Yeah, so I think a couple things that we want to keep in mind is the small area plan asks and directs us or suggests is that we consider a maximum building size of that area. a lot of what we looked at a presentation on Monday night that hasn't been out there that long to consume. So you want to make sure that you have time to do that. I would say that, when you talk about, a policy shift, even though Small Area Plan talks about it, you want to provide some time for you to receive community input from all segments of the community that wish to give you that. So I don't know that you would. I think we would want to come back in and talk about all the different things that we mentioned about what square footage and the impacts of any decision that you make. And we'll want to talk about, it talks about that in the village core area. Are we going to talk about that in the village commercial or in the general commercial district? So I think there's some more information we want to talk about. So I don't know that while I understand that, hey, it would be easy just to say 8,500 square feet and put it into the ordinance. I think I would suggest that we talk about what all those impacts are, so that you understand and everyone understands, 8,500 square feet in the village core. Is that the number we want to achieve? Maybe it is. And if that's the case, that's fine. But outside in the general commercial district, right now that's home to, the county rec, the park and center, you've got the Ingalls, you've got a lot of buildings that are greater than 8,000 square feet and 8,500 square feet. Now that, again, doesn't mean you shouldn't change the threshold, but just understanding the impacts that those discussions have. I would tell you that in my experience that certainly what the small area plan calls for throws out a number, but it actually asks you to consider it. So I think it would be a good idea to have a good conversation about that. And staff can certainly bring back information about, hey, here are the building sizes that we have. Jake has provided some of that information, but I don't know that he did an expansive search on the general commercial districts. I think we'll want to have those conversations, and understand the limitations. So I don't know that this is as quick of a process as it'll be changed and done in 30 to 60 days. We can come to some consensus in that time frame. But then you're going to look at another 45 to 60 days before you get it approved. So I think there's still some time built in here that certainly it will not be. And I've told you this before. There's not a lot of quick fixes in doing this work. So I mean, relatively speaking, right? These processes do take a little bit of time to play out because we have different levels that we go through. So it's not necessarily that this will be decided and completed in 30 to 60 days. So
it sounds like you're saying, like, if we hustled, the timeline would be 4 months.
4 to 5 months.
Yeah, and that's not anything different than anything else we've ever done, right? Like I told you, from the date that we talk about something, it usually takes 5 to 6 months to go all the way from let's put it on the agenda to discuss, which is normally much like what we do here. So March, it was on the agenda to discuss. We heard a presentation. It sounded like you guys were going to put it on the April agenda for further discussion. So, and then after that further discussion, you usually give staff direction about, hey, this is what we'd like to see in draft form, and we can talk about that. And then we go in and then you have a public hearing, and then it goes through the other levels of the process. So usually any of these changes take a little bit of time. So I don't want, I want you to kind of be aware that it's not a quick fix, and what we're talking about isn't quite as quick as some people, will think, just because the process does take a little bit of time.
So as I said in the last meeting, like I have heard like what the community is saying, and like we're here to guide things, but we're obviously here to hear what the people of the community are saying. I mean, and serve the community as best we can. So we're going to work on this and study this as fast as possible. Seems 4 to 5 months. So the real question is, do we keep this mistake that means nothing in a picture to make that Michael Poston and Heather has recommended that we take out, just so that there is a number 5,000 that and with a sentence that appears somewhere? What, like, while we're working to actually make law, do we have this confusing thing out there? So if it makes y'all feel more comfortable, I'm with the group. I'm not trying to I just thought this was like the responsible thing to do, like taking out the trash.
We all did, Michael. And, you know, this thing has blown. It's ridiculous of how many interpretations are out there in the field. And we're all seeing it because we're all reading the same emails. But, you know, I guess, and if there were true detriment in leaving it there, it would be a different discussion. But I think precedent has been set, and I think business would go on as usual right now until we get this thing squared away. And why not let the Cashiers community have some input on it? And I'm great. I think it's great because I think there until this McCauley thing, people didn't even know we had a planning council. And it's super that we're getting this kind of exposure, even though it's heated exposure. And maybe now some of these people that are very community minded, as we all are as well, will want to get more involved and will have a better representation instead of, you know, kind of the 7 of us just trying to figure things out. I think it's a great thing. But if there were true detriment to this, not fixing this today, then, but nobody's given me really reason why there's true detriment if we don't repeal that.
Heather, Michael, do you agree with Bob?
Well, one thing, if I can say, first of all, Bob, just on behalf of the county as a whole, if I can echo what you just said about the involvement, that was so great to see. And I know all of you that work so hard on the small area plan, and I know as you remember Mike Poston bringing that to you and saying, please, let's do the small area plan. Let's see what the community wants. Boy, would we have loved to have this input at that time, right? So yeah, I mean, just to echo that, it's been great to hear from people and for them to know and be involved with what's going on. And so yeah, actually we talked about this. We internally, we understand the situation you all are in. It's very uncomfortable. These are your community members, you know, that feel strongly about this. We get that. We understand. We thought through what are some things we could do to make this an easier decision for you to help you out with this. One of the things we talked about, we ultimately felt like it wasn't the way to go, but based on what I'm hearing here today, you know, yes, we can leave the graphic in until we have something else to put in and to change, because I don't think it affects it. But maybe if your motion could include recognition that we don't have a maximum square footage and that we're operating under the same ordinance we've already operated on, would give us at least that clarification to be able to work with moving forward without as much of the liability. And that's something that we had discussed, because we understand and we appreciate all of you and feel terrible that you're having, you know, to do this. But at the same time, it's great to hear from everyone in the community.
Bob, would you be willing to amend your motion?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So
well, what Heather, what you're asking me for is to, well, let's just strip it out, but we're going to be able to defer it and talk about it later. And I don't think that's the right thing to do. To me, I get it. I don't think that that graphic has any bearing whatsoever. Again, because of precedent that's already set, and the community doesn't know what we've gone through and the approvals that we've gone through. They're focusing on this, but if there were true detriment to it in leaving it, it would be a different discussion, but I don't think it is.
Well, is that, I mean, so what would be my next step, Heather, just to call the question?
You can, if there are no other comments, you can call the question, or you can just call for a vote if there are no other comments, and you can vote, and then depending on the vote, you can move forward from there. But just, you might want to clarify what the motion is before you move for a vote.
Do you remember your motion, or Michael, do you have the text of Bob's motion?
And I don't have the text of it, but Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, I think your motion was just to basically to defer or table this item until further consideration. Is that close to enough to that? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Michael, but I think it's exactly that, or if it's more intentional and more direct, until we find a substitute that is applicable to that graphic. And if that, I hope it doesn't take that long, because I think the small area plan has it laid out, and we have credibility with the community, because the community says, follow the small area plan, follow the small area plan. Well, you know, they don't know that the small area plan is calling for a higher square footage than that graphic shows, even if it was in square feet or whatever. But you know what? Let's do that, and let's find a replacement for that item. Whatever that replacement is, that's what we need to figure out and draft and insert.
Well, but our rules are based on the text. So are you saying that we should address it in the text and in a graphic? I understood when we were just going to table this discussion, when it came about, when we're discussing making a replacement for the graphic, I don't understand what we're trying to do.
Well, what's the reason for deferring it, if not to replace it? Just to have this conversation again?
Well, I think we're just going to not have this. I mean, that's the reason why it should be, maybe the motion should be just to not make the text amendment, and then we just set building square footage on the next agenda. So it's not like we don't have to say we're replacing it. We just say we leave it how it is, and then we have building square footage on at the next meeting. But until we replace it, I don't know what that means, because we don't govern, to my understanding, by the picture anyway. So I don't know what "until we replace it" means.
Well, I think what the community is calling for is that we do have some maximums, whatever those maximums may be, but we have established maximums, and you know that's the whole. I think that's the whole crux. That there's no maximums, or they think there's a 5,000 something maximum, and precedent shows otherwise. But I think it's a great idea, and if people of the community think that we should be, even if the UDO doesn't state it now, then we should be looking at those maximums.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying is, why don't we just reject the text amendment and tell everybody in front of God and everybody on the YouTube that we're going to begin our discussion of building size in the next. I'm just trying to have stuff that we can accomplish, because the rule is really based on the words, not the picture anyway. So until we can replace it, I don't know. Maybe I'm splitting hairs. Does anyone else have any feeling on this? Does anyone like the way Bob restated his motion, or does anyone think we should just reject the text amendment, or any other opinions?
I mean, do we even have to have a motion on deleting that graphic out of the whole deal, because it's not even part of anything that's legally standing?
Well, Dave, that would be an entirely different motion. But Bob started with a motion that the first is that he said that we should table this discussion, and then when he restated his motion, he said that we should table it until such time as that we can replace the graphic.
Well, he also mentioned replacing the square footage part when he made his first motion. And that was part of his first motion.
So
anyway, go ahead.
So what I need now, Bob, I guess, because we didn't get notes on your first one, is just your best version of what you would want to restate your motion as that we're discussing right now.
And I'm not really good on wording and what have you, but I would like to move to defer this topic until we can come up with an appropriate replacement.
Okay. For the graphic or for the rule?
For the rule and the graphic. How's that?
Okay. All right. So the motion is that we defer making a text amendment till we look at this issue in such a way that it would comprehensively look at both of the written ordinance and the graphic referred to in the UDO. Does that everyone agree that's what he's saying?
Agreed. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Then I'll call the question. All in favor of the previously restated motion?
Michael, can I just do a quick roll call? That'd be easier, and that way we can get it all down. So I'm just going to go as I see on the screen. So a vote in favor is the table. Debbie?
4. And did we have to second it? Did somebody
Oh, sorry.
have to?
Yes, I'm sorry.
It was already
Seconded.
Yes, second by Mark. Yes, so we're good.
Okay,
So Debbie, you're a yay.
yay.
Okay. Glenn?
Yay.
Michael?
Yay.
Mark?
Hey,
Bob?
Yay.
David?
Yay.
Motion will carry.
All right. So I believe that concludes all of our new business. So at this time, if I could have a motion to adjourn the meeting that
Michael, I got a quick question.
Yes.
Should we enlist Stuart to come back to clarify their graphic and perhaps explain this new small area presentation that he gave us on Monday?
Well, the problem that I understand a little is that there's two divisions of Stuart now that have a conflict, because Stuart in one capacity worked for the county, and they have written us a letter saying we made a mistake. And it said, please correct the mistake. Then we have a group of individuals and Cashiers that have hired Stuart to like make a point to us, essentially, that kind of is in cross purposes with the mistake they've admitted to have made. So I don't know, Heather, or Michael, how do we feel about it?
Thanks, Michael. If I can explain, Mark, if your question is if you want Chad, who wrote the letter and who works, with the UDO group that we hired, the county hired and paid a lot of money to work on this UDO to come in and explain about the error, that is one thing we could potentially do. But but Stuart is not representing the county, is not being hired by the county from the presentation that you heard the other night. That was not from the county's perspective. That was hired by a private group. And so as Mike will tell you, in bringing this forward, it needs to come from the county, and we do need to let this plan be out there and see if the county wants to take any action in bringing in help and moving this discussion forward. There are, and I know several of you have heard, as we have, from others who have a different opinion or a different perspective on some of this, that we will also want to hear from. And it's important then that you have a consultant at that point that's neutral, that is able to come in from the county and get all perspectives and kind of put that together for you. So it just depends if you want to clarify what you want, or if you want to hear from Mike Poston more on that issue. But we can work with whatever you want, but with those parameters.
Yeah, I think what we want to do. I'm sorry, Glenn, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I think that Mark was onto something, and I think what I would like to see happen is that we probably won't meet for another 3 weeks or so. So what could be done in the meantime? Can we have a consultant, or maybe it's the county? Maybe it's John and Michael, yourself, and others, but come to that meeting with some perspectives. I know there'll be a lot more to do, input from, the community, et cetera. But I just hate seeing we hang up tonight and then we start kind of cold 3 weeks from now. I just feel like there can be stuff done, and maybe it's us too, that we come in with a perspective on, what do we think the maximum should be in the core and in the commercial district. Each one of us come in prepared to that next meeting to have the discussion. My point is just, you know, I know it's going to take 4 or 5 months, but let's make sure it's not 7 or 8, you know.
And totally agree, Glenn. And that's my point in telling you that's just to clarify the length of time. But I think what you make a great point. I think what you can do and what helps in these conversations is when you guys have had a chance to really think about what all these recommendations, look at the small area plan, look at those recommendations, and we can talk about those recommendations. Staff can be prepared. John and I can be prepared to talk to you about here's what exists here and how that plays into this discussion, and whatever number, and if it's 8,500 in the village and 8,500. What I think at the end of the day, what we want to make sure is when we have these conversations, we understand what, you know, how that plays out, so that we don't come back in a year and say, man, well, we didn't think about this situation. So we want just to have those conversations on the front end, and as long as we all understand what the I won't say cost benefit, but how that decision works, I think it's fine. And certainly, I think it's great as a planner, by the way, that we're talking about plans. You know, there's a lot of communities where these planning documents stay hidden, not because people are hiding them, just because the community's not using them. So, you know, those are all good things for us to do, and these are good discussions for us to have. I think as long as we have the discussion in a way that allows you just to understand from as many sides as possible what the implications of the decision is, and then make the decision. And then once the decision's made, we make those changes, and then hopefully we feel good about where we are as the community in these changes. So I think we can come back with some thoughts. I think what we would come back with is just understanding, you know, here's the 8,500. We'd probably like to expand a little bit more. I think Jake even said he didn't get to the whole general commercial district about building sizes. We'll want to know more about that. So staff can come back with some of that information, and then we can have a conversation. And if you guys are also looking into it and you guys are speaking to everyone in the community, just a reminder, this is a legislative decision. Speak to everybody and anybody you'd like to, take in all the input that you feel necessary, and let's have a conversation about this. I don't see any need to slow down a process to have these conversations. And certainly that we put it on the, you know, I thought the consensus on Monday's meetings that we would be discussing it in April, and trying to bring this conversation, you know, more in line. So staff, John and I had already talked about things that we could bring forward to the council, information, so that we can have these discussions and have these considerations. So I probably took a little bit longer to explain to you that I agree, Glenn, with your point, and I apologize, but I'm sure you're all used to it by now.
Well, and I also think that if we paid so much money to Stuart, and this Chad Sari guy who wrote us this letter wants to come in and present to us his letter and explain the mistake that Stuart made that is causing us so much trouble now, and their feelings on it as a company. If he's, I would invite him to come to our next meeting and present his letter.
Yeah. If I could, I think if we're going to move forward with this discussion, I would say let's spend our time focused on the discussion. That'd be my recommendation. I think we all understand that there's an error in the UDO. And I think if what the board's decision tonight is let's have these conversations. So I would say that if the board's amenable, or the council's amenable, let staff with Heather and John and myself, you know, bring back some information about this specific topic. If you as a council will also start thinking, and not start thinking, you guys have been thinking about it, but continue thinking about all these things and the implications and all these things that we're doing, that'll help us have a really good positive meeting in April, where I think we can make some headway. I think we can have some discussions about where this goes, and to, if 8,500 square feet is the number, that's the number, and that's fine as long as we're having those conversations to do that. But during those conversations, we may have other thoughts we need to do. So when we say consider, it's really, you know, again, let's talk about it. So again, I'm getting a little long-winded, but that's where I would say that I would recommend to put most of our energy.
Sounds good. So does anyone else have any comments, or are we able to have a motion to dismiss?
What about, I have a quick question. So the thing that came from Jake the other day, are we okay to look at that and use that as some kind of I mean, I know we can't use it because somebody privately purchased it, but there's some pretty good ideas in that, in my opinion, and from what I'm hearing from people who have already contacted me just from Monday, that like a lot of what's in that. Is it okay to even be looking at that and using that as maybe a tool in talking to these people?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Debbie. It's public record, and right, you're exactly right. There are a lot of good things in there, and a lot of good things you'll want to use. And it is because it was presented at the meeting, public record. So please use it, encourage people to read it, look at it. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we're just going to have a good conversation about this. And like I said, it's just, I think so. I agree with Heather.
Okay. If I could make a request from you guys, again, it seems a very common theme here of all the emails that we have gotten, that everybody is referring to the small area plan, the small area plan this, the small area plan that. So I know that there were maximums in all 3 districts laid out in the small area plan, and we use that as a base to go by. And then, you know, if somebody says, oh, you can't put that number in, we go, well, it's in the small area plan right here that you guys put together. So I think that should be our base of what we kind of work from and massage that to make sure that it's covering all the details that we need to cover.
Well, with any work you guys can do on an existing building surveys to just continue to give people context. I mean, the small area plan was a huge overview, whereas now we're going to study in depth like a single issue. So, I mean, we have that, and that's good, but you know, all information that you can bring in terms of existing building sizes that would be relevant in Cashiers. If there are, I don't know how you guys would search for this, but if other relevant small municipality or zoned areas have any building square footage maximums, if there's a precedent for this other places, that would be good to know to see what results we'll get from this.
Sure. Well, glad to do that.
All right. Well, any other comments?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to dismiss.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you,
Okay.
everybody.
Okay.
Meeting is adjourned.
Appreciate it.